A lot of my uncles and cousins were affiliated with the Mexican mafia. That intrigued me growing up. Seeing people who were around that and affiliated with that, it's like something they live by, you know?
When my mom told me what had happened, I didn't believe it. I think she did what she did because she had 6 kids and she didn't think that there was no other option when there was. Very beautiful, but I think she was vulnerable. And that's my mom and dad when they were younger. In this picture, they look really happy, but this is when my dad would like beat my mom a lot. I'm glad she left our dad when she did, but she was stuck in a cycle that she couldn't get out of. And that led her to meet Daniel. I feel like if she wouldn't have met Daniel, she wouldn't be in jail for murder. That's for sure.
Hi, hello. Yes, I can see you. It's fine. My name is Candy Dominguez. I'm incarcerated for murder, and I have a 30-year sentence. My childhood. Let's see. It was not that great, actually. My father was a drug addict. He got addicted to heroin. My mother, she just looked out for partying. They would have parties in our backyard, and people would get drunk and they would start arguing. Some people would stab each other, beat each other. So watching all of this growing up, it just made us withdraw from our family, withdraw from trying to be accepted by anybody. Me and my sister, we suffered sexual abuse with my father. Got bounced around from household to household. I became like a nuisance to people. They didn't want to deal with me. So when I took to the streets, I was looking for acceptance. A lot of my friends who were in the streets, their families were affiliated with the Texas Mexican Mafia. And so I was involved with gang members and I sold drugs. It's like once you become a part of them, that's like a family to them. It wasn't a life to live, It wasn't glamorous and fun like people made it seem. But when you're lost and lonely, you'll take anything you can. We slept wherever we were that night. If not, we would go steal a car and park in a parking lot. We'll just go park in there and sleep in the cars. And as long as you were alive when you went to sleep and you're alive and breathing when you woke up, then you're good. When I had my first daughter, it was hard because I was a kid. My mother, she didn't want nothing to do with me. And everywhere I went to stay with, whether they were family or not, it's like these people didn't care. They'd give us a place to sleep on the floor, you know? And they were collecting welfare benefits off of us and still not even trying to help us, really.
My cousin Jose, we would have starved if it wasn't for him.
You know, he would go to McDonald's and jump in the dumpsters and get food that they would throw out and come back and give it to us so we can eat. So if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have survived. He told us how to make it out of our struggles. Eventually, once I started seeing the way he really was, I chose to keep my distance. I still had love for him. He's my cousin at the end of the day. And I tried to help him. And I told him, hey, Primo, that lifestyle ain't shit no more. That's not the way to live, you know? And he's like, oh, Primo, I'm trying, you know? But not hard enough because he went right back to it. I first got involved with him when I was like 13 years old, going on 14. When I got with him, I just wanted to be settled in life. But it was a very dysfunctional relationship. He did a lot of drugs and he drank a whole lot. He cheated on me. He went back and forth with other women. He would physically beat me. He would verbally yell at me. Like he was very emotionally abusive, you know? But I actually stayed with him for 22 years. Emotionally, I was really hurt and in a lot of pain, you know? And the only thing that kept me going is thinking that I had to take care of my kids. So when I met Daniel, it was like I can use him to move forward without looking back. One of his cousins, she said, hey, Candy, I just want to tell you, be careful because he's real abusive when he's in a relationship. But I felt like he was the only thing I can depend on. And I wanted to see where it will go. That night, my cousin Jose called me. It was like 3 in the morning, 2 or 3 in the morning. So I was like, hey, he wants to buy some drugs. You want to make some money or what? And he's like, all right, let's go. So we get there, and my cousin does not have the money for these drugs. And Daniel started talking to him, like they started arguing. And Jose stabbed Daniel in the back. Daniel went to the hospital, and his lung was punctured in 2 different places. He pulled the IV out of his arm, and we left the hospital. He was so angry. It's like he was thinking I set him up or something. So, yeah, I was worried. So 2 more days went by, and we were just at my house. My dad was in the front room watching TV. My little kids were in the bedroom. Daniel came back, and that's when he acted crazy. Daniel, he kept telling me about my cousin, Jose, that he was going to kill him. He was going to kill him. Daniel didn't seem like he can kill somebody by himself. But around his cousin, Gabriel, he seemed like it was more, okay, he can do something because he had somebody with him. Daniel told me, you go find your cousin today, and if you don't, I'm going to kill you tomorrow. And he's like, today's the day, Candy. Today's the day you're going to help me catch your cousin. And I didn't feel like I had no choice. They sent Gabriel's girlfriend with me. The whole time we left my house, she was on the phone with them. Daniel, he wanted to know what was going on at all times. So we go around the block and we found my cousin on the corner. He agrees to go to my house. And we park in front of my house and he gets out. And him and Sylvia went first. Jose walked into my back room, through the dining room, into the hallway. He went into my bedroom. And he was shocked when he seen Gabriel. And then Daniel came out of my kid's bedroom. And he had an aluminum bat. And he looked at my cousin and he said, do you remember me? And my cousin looked at him and said, no, Dirty, I've never seen you before. And he said, oh, I'm the one you stabbed. And then he hit him with the bat. I honestly think he should have died with the beating Daniel gave him. But my cousin was still fighting a whole lot. Like, he was not giving up his life that easy. Daniel and Gabriel, they carried my cousin to the back house. I didn't think Daniel was going to do anything more.
But later they said in the court that Jose had a bag over his head.
And Daniel was trying to choke him. And the next day when I went to the back house, yeah, he was dead.
So these photos are before Daniel came into our life. I don't like to look at these photos that much because pictures could be deceiving because, I mean, in some of them we looked really happy, but there was 1,000 things behind the photo, you know. I'm Brenda Gavan, and Jose Manchaca was my second cousin, and Candy Dominguez is my mother. We would call Jose Pee-wee. That's what everyone called him. Him and my mom were really close. Growing up, they were almost like brother and sister. Pee Wee was always in and out of trouble, involved in drugs. But he was very protective of us girls in the family. And he was very loving. He did his best when he wasn't on drugs. Whenever Pee Wee was in a bind, my mom, she would help him as much as she could. They both valued family over everything.
And my cousin trusted my mom. But then she met Daniel.
With Daniel, I think she was trying to find happiness in a way that we couldn't give her happiness. But then things got even worse. When Daniel would come over and they'd go in the room, she'd come out and her eyes were like really glossy. So I think she was on drugs, but she put on this like, I don't care about anything, you know? I don't know. It's like she went numb when she was around Daniel. There were people coming to that house. So I think at one point he was running drugs through my mom's house. I had just turned 15. So it was like, it was scary. I didn't know what was gonna happen, but I knew the house was not safe. So I went to go live with my uncle. I do think she was scared of Daniel, but she had already let him in. My mom never had been in trouble ever. Never would she had killed Pee Wee on her own. But
That night,
Daniel told my mom
she had to choose.
her cousin or her kids. And she felt like there was no other way.
Daniel had supposedly shown her 3 holes that he had dug up.
They were supposed to be graves. And told her, like, this is where your kids are gonna be if you don't do what I say. And that's when everything was set in motion to what was gonna happen.
The night that this happened, we got called to a house to assist the murder division. We pulled up, the door was open, and we just went in. Everything, it smelled like, like it had been recently cleaned. Nothing looked absurdly out of place. But we realized that, hey, there's a back shed. So I remember going out the back door, and then as soon as we hit the backyard, that's when I smelled the body. We immediately gave each other a look and said, hey man, we gotta go fucking check that shed. So when we got the door open to the back, we saw a Tupperware bin. And as we get closer to the Tupperware bin, that's when the smell got stronger and stronger and stronger. My partner was the first one to open it, And then he moved around the black bag to confirm that it was a body, and it was in pieces, in a garbage bag, in a Tupperware box. I mean, I could see the flesh, I could smell it. It was horrible because of just how gruesome and insane that scene was. And that is not something that people see every day. Evidence detectives came out. I didn't think that it could get worse than having human remains in a Tupperware box, but this was only the beginning. We were there for a couple of hours, just with officers in the perimeter, detectives walking around taking pictures. I remember there being a barbecue grill. I remember opening it and looking at it and thinking like, wow, this is a really nice smoker. And I remember closing it, and for a second, I'm like, wait a minute. That is not just like leftover meat. You had a human bone in a barbecue pit. As a cop, you know, you see many, many horrible things, but I've never seen somebody purposely dismantle, you know, this human life, just disposed of in such a inhumane way. I thought that was pretty bad.
All right, come on in. Yeah, just have a seat. All right, Candy. I mean, we have a body there at your house. I know what happened, okay? I need to understand why this happened. What are you afraid of?
The word to be. They could tell me if I feel like this. We're all nothing to say.
Okay.
In San Antonio, this was a very big case at that time because the Texas Mexican Mafia is a feared gang in the city. And the brutality on this case was a total stamp of what they would do. They beat him with bats, they killed him, they dismembered him, they burned him up. My name is Anthony Rodriguez. I'm a criminal investigator for the Bexar County District Attorney's Office, and I'm the gang investigator for the office. The Texas Mexican Mafia has been rooted here since the 80s, and they operate off of the I-35 corridor, a highway which runs from Mexico all the way up to Canada. And that's a major route for drugs, for human trafficking. And because of that, they've actually declared San Antonio as their capital. And the primary actors in this case, the defendant and the victim, are both affiliated with the Texas Mexican Mafia. I was brought onto this case to assist the prosecutor with trial preparation, and specifically the prosecution of Daniel Lopez. There were other co-defendants, but that was not the priority at the time. We had read the statements, we had watched the videos, and we did form our own assumptions that Daniel Lopez was the one that actually killed Jose Menchaca. Jose Menchaca was beat within an inch of his life. He was dragged to a detached garage, and it was there that Daniel Lopez put a plastic bag over his face and suffocated him, and that's how he ended up dying.
Daniel, to meet again.
Daniel Lopez is a member of the Texas Mexican Mafia. However, he's not just a member, he was a ranked member.
I have Pee-wee, who is dead, okay? I have all this evidence that's been recovered when I run the search warrant.
He had prior felony convictions. And when you look at a criminal history of a person like this, it's no surprise that they would commit murder. But Daniel Lopez was uncooperative. He would not talk to us.
Kenny, this is kind of where we at. You gonna look at me? I want to have a decent conversation with you, okay? Because like everything that we talked about before has gotten us to this point, okay?
Initially, Candy was somewhat uncooperative, but the judge ruled that she should go to jail until the trial began. And eventually, she finally came forward and explained her involvement in the case. Kenya Dominguez said that she was told by Daniel Lopez that if she said anything, if she went to the police, she would end up just like Jose Menchaca. And she had every reason to believe his threats. So learning her role in this case was shocking to me, but at the end of the day, it wasn't a stretch to think that the only female that was surviving in that house at that time would participate in the disposal of the body. So you had Daniel Lopez, who killed Jose Menchaca. You had Gabriel Moreno, who it was alleged had assisted Daniel Lopez in killing Jose Menchaca. And then you had Candy Dominguez. She did have a role in it, but it wasn't to the degree of the other two. And because her story was needed, she was offered a deal. The prosecutor made it very clear that Candy was party to this crime and she is looking at going to prison. But several people in our office felt that she likely acted in duress. And that's how I felt after I read the reports, after I watched the interview. I remember feeling this, this poor lady. She had no choice but to do it. Her kids are in the other room. This murder took place. His body's left at her house. She can't call the cops. She's afraid of what's going to happen. So she is forced to have to act.
Candy, at least in the eyes of the law, is just as responsible for Jose's death as Daniel Lopez. But in cases involving a gang like the Mexican Mafia, the most common issue you will encounter is uncooperative or reluctant witnesses. So a plea agreement had been made with her in exchange for her cooperation and testimony in trial. Candy Dominguez was a key player in this because of the fact that she is just so open and honest and how she talks about what happened to Jose Menchaca. My name's Joshua Summers. At the time that I got involved in this case, I was a prosecutor with the Major Crimes Unit. And that's how I became involved on the Daniel Lopez case. Daniel Lopez had a lengthy criminal history. He was a known member of the Mexican Mafia, and he had a very violent past. But I also discovered that Daniel Lopez had murdered at least one other person before. We learned that a woman named Dominique Hernandez had been reported as a missing person. She was known to be dating Daniel Lopez. As I began to delve into the case, we were able to track down a woman that had seen Daniel Lopez burn all of Dominique's remains. Not unlike that of Jose, she was dismembered and her remains were completely burned. Ultimately, Daniel Lopez had not only murdered Jose Menchaca, but he had also murdered Dominique Hernandez. So when you talk about who Daniel Lopez was, when I say that he was evil, I don't use that word lightly.
Daniel Lopez sits alone, flanked by numerous armed bailiffs and deputies, listening to testimony from multiple witnesses who say Lopez violently murdered and burned the remains of Jose Menchaca. Multiple witnesses say Lopez shot and killed his girlfriend, 24-year-old mother of three, Dominique Hernandez, 2 months before Lopez violently murdered and burned the remains of Jose Menchaca.
Explaining to Dominique's family that there was not going to be a trial was definitely a hard thing to do, but we were at least able to tell the story of what happened in that punishment phase of the murder of Jose Menchaca to ensure that justice was done. I thought that someone as evil and bad as Daniel Lopez certainly deserved a life sentence. Daniel Lopez designed a plan to exact revenge against Jose Menchaca. And he had Candy Dominguez help lure Jose over to her home so that Daniel Lopez could carry out that plan to murder Jose Menchaca.
In Candy's case, it's more like what could have caused a person to be caught up in such an awful situation that they felt compelled to do these things? Did you have a choice? And if you did have a choice, what were your choices? What could happen if I don't do this? My impression of the relationship between Daniel and Candy was one of control. She was a perfect victim for him.
She wanted somebody that was a bad boy, and she found him, and it was obvious to me that he just totally took over her. Candy was basically threatened to involve herself. And if Candy hadn't lured her cousin to the house that day, Daniel would have made good on his threat to kill her and harm her children. So we felt that we would be able to convince the court that they should give her a more reasonable sentence, maybe 15 years. That's what our hope was. But I don't think the court was convinced. We were disappointed, but she was silent. She was stoic. Her whole body language was a shutdown, was a silent figure in the courtroom.
I would never make sense of what I did and what I took part in. So the best thing is to leave it where it's at and continue to move forward. That's all I can do, you know? Because so many lives were affected behind the decisions we made that day. I do feel like I should have gotten time, you know? But I feel like they came for me harder than they did everybody else.
I was expecting her to lash out, to be aggrieved. But there was, I think, a raw acceptability. It should not have been the 30-year sentence because she went through all of the abuse at the beginning stages of her life. She was very much traumatized. She then met Daniel, and she winds up with a man in her life who takes her to the extreme. Involving herself with somebody with that type of background is only going to result in the kind of situation that she found herself in. You know, he's somebody that you need to be afraid of.
Everybody was scared of me, but I'm only one individual in this world. One. Candy, I feel like she set me up, right? Because nobody in this world has seen me kill that man. That's what I'm saying. So how am I being charged with murder? Candy, she showed me a side of her was like, man, this is crazy.
Daniel is a very dangerous person, but Candy was worse.
I absolutely think Candy was in charge of this whole thing.
Quite frankly, she scared me.
Candy, she's evil. And that was my biggest mistake ever, trusting her.
The sentence hit the investigation like gasoline thrown across open fire, because until that moment detectives believe they were uncovering a terrible accident buried beneath decades of corruption and cowardice. But Walter Grady's quiet claim inside interview room B suggested something much larger had been hidden inside Hollow Creek since long before Noah Callahan vanished into the snowstorm of 1987. Investigators immediately pressed him for specifics. What exactly did Noah see inside the school gym storage room? Walter hesitated for the first time since his confession began. His fingers trembled against the metal table while snow battered the sheriff's station windows. Outside, then he whispered a name nobody expected to hear. Pastor Eli Brennan. The room reportedly fell silent again, even after 35 years. Pastor Brennan remained one of the most respected figures in Hollow Creek history. Founder of the local youth shelter program, decorated war veteran, community leader, dead since 2003 after a public battle with cancer that drew sympathy across the state. Streets were named after him. Scholarships carried his name. Children's charities still displayed his photograph in framed hallways throughout the county. Walter claimed Noah accidentally witnessed Coach Thomas Bell and Pastor Brennan together inside the locked gym storage room shortly after basketball practice ended early because of the approaching snowstorm. Detectives demanded clarification immediately. Walter struggled to answer directly, repeatedly insisting Samuel never described every detail. But according to the confession, Noah saw enough to panic and threatened to tell his parents what was happening inside the school. That alone terrified the adults involved. Then Walter said something investigators would later describe as one of the darkest revelations of the entire case. My brother told me Noah wasn't the first kid who saw too much. Federal agents immediately began reviewing archive complaints involving Pastor Brennan. Thomas Bell and the Hollow Creek Youth Outreach Program operated jointly through the church and local school district during the late 70s and 80s. At first, the records appeared ordinary. Volunteer schedules, fundraisers, summer camps, transportation logs. Then investigators uncovered several sealed disciplinary reports connected to inappropriate interactions between staff and students dating back to 1978. None resulted in criminal charges. Most disappeared from official files after brief internal reviews authorized personally by Mayor Richard Vane. Hollow Creek exploded when the existence of those reports leaked publicly. News anchors interrupted broadcasts again. Secret abuse complaints buried for decades. Pastor linked to missing boy scandal. Crowds gathered outside Hollow Creek Community Church, demanding answers while elderly parish members cried openly on courthouse steps, refusing to believe Pastor Brennan could have harmed children. Former students began flooding online forums with stories hidden for decades. Locked office meetings, uncomfortable touching, late-night rides home after basketball practice. Most survivors admitted they stayed silent because the men involved controlled nearly every institution in town. Church, school, police, politics. Hollow Creek suddenly looked less like a quiet rural community and more like a sealed pressure chamber finally exploding after years of silence. Meanwhile, investigators at Blackwater Ridge uncovered additional evidence surrounding Noah's burial beneath layers of frozen soil near the child's remains. Forensic teams recovered rusted fragments of a flashlight, tire impressions preserved in compacted clay, and fibers matching police-issued wool blankets distributed to Hollow Creek patrol vehicles during the 80s. The discovery placed Samuel Grady's cruiser at the burial scene exactly as Walter described. But another detail disturbed investigators even more. Noah's remains showed signs of restraint injuries around the wrists. Detectives reportedly stared at forensic photographs in disbelief because the marks suggested Noah may have been tied up after the initial injury near the railway crossing. That detail contradicted Walter's earlier claim that panic alone caused the tragedy. Sheriff Mercer confronted him again during his second interrogation. Walter looked exhausted now, older somehow, hollowed out by memories clawing back to the surface after decades underground. At first he denied, knowing anything about restraints. Then investigators presented forensic findings. Walter reportedly broke down for the first time since entering the station, crying quietly into his hands. He admitted Samuel once confessed that Noah became hysterical during transport after regaining consciousness inside the patrol car. According to Walter, Coach Bell feared the boy would run or attract attention if they stopped for help. So Mayor Vane ordered Samuel to restrain him temporarily until they figured things out. Detectives listening inside the room later described the atmosphere as unbearable, because each new detail stripped away another layer of excuse surrounding the crime. This was no longer a panicked cover-up after an accident. It was the deliberate imprisonment of a terrified child by trusted adults who chose self-preservation over saving his life. Then another witness surfaced unexpectedly. Her name was Rebecca Sloan, former school secretary, 74 years old, living quietly in Florida since leaving Hollow Creek in 1991. Rebecca contacted federal investigators after recognizing Coach Bell's name during national news coverage. What she revealed deepened the nightmare dramatically. According to Rebecca, multiple students complained privately about Bell throughout the early 80s. Most accusations involved inappropriate behavior inside gym offices or after-hours practices. But one complaint stood out. In late 1979, shortly before Ethan Doyle disappeared, Rebecca claimed Ethan himself told her he was afraid of Coach Bell and Pastor Brennan. She reported the conversation to Principal Howard Finch. Days later, Ethan vanished near Hollow Creek Lake. Rebecca said Principal Finch instructed staff never to discuss the complaint again because the boy probably ran away. Investigators immediately reopened Finch's archived personnel records. What they discovered sent shockwaves through the task force. Howard Finch resigned abruptly from education in 1988, only months after Noah vanished and relocated across the country without explanation. He died in Arizona in 2007. But buried inside sealed county correspondence, investigators uncovered evidence Finch privately warned Mayor Vane about dangerous rumors involving Bell and Brennan months before Noah disappeared. Those warnings vanished from official files almost immediately afterward. Hollow Creek residents reacted with fury once the revelations became public. Protesters marched outside the abandoned school building carrying photographs of Noah and Ethan, while former students painted accusations across the gymnasium walls overnight. Local secrets killed children. They all knew. The town itself felt poisoned by memory. Every hallway, every church pew, every faded yearbook photograph suddenly carried suspicion. Parents who once trusted those institutions completely now questioned everything about their childhoods. But investigators were only beginning to understand how deep the corruption extended. Because during forensic examination of evidence recovered from Samuel Grady's old patrol cruiser preserved in county storage since his death, investigators uncovered traces of blood hidden beneath rear seat panels. DNA analysis later confirmed the blood belonged to Noah Callahan. Yet another discovery inside the vehicle caused even greater alarm. Fibers matching Ethan Doyle's jacket from 1979. The task force reportedly entered complete silence after the laboratory report arrived. Samuel Grady's patrol vehicle connected directly to both missing boys separated by 8 years. Sheriff Mercer immediately confronted Walter again, demanding the truth about Ethan Doyle. Walter appeared genuinely horrified when investigators revealed the fiber evidence. According to him, Samuel always insisted he only became involved after Noah's injury near the railway crossing. Walter claimed his brother repeatedly denied participating in Ethan Doyle's disappearance personally. But Samuel once hinted that Mayor Vane cleaned up another mess years before Noah vanished. Detectives now feared Hollow Creek's leadership may have buried multiple crimes involving vulnerable children over nearly a decade. Then came perhaps the most devastating revelation yet. During review of archived emergency weather reports from December 23, 1987, investigators discovered a forgotten call placed from a roadside payphone near Blackwater Ridge at approximately 2:11 a.m., the same period Noah was allegedly transported there. The caller reported hearing a child screaming somewhere in the woods. Dispatch records showed Samuel Grady responded personally to the area. No follow-up report was ever filed. Investigators confronted Walter with the timeline immediately. Walter's face reportedly went pale before he whispered words detectives would never forget. Then Noah was still alive when they buried him. The room froze completely. Forensic specialists re-examined Noah's remains within hours, searching for confirmation. Days later, the preliminary findings returned. Microscopic soil particles discovered inside the child's airway suggested Noah may indeed have been breathing during burial. The revelation detonated nationwide. Forensics suggest missing boy buried alive. Hollow Creek horror deepens. Investigators fear systematic cover-up. The town spiraled toward total collapse emotionally. Noah Callahan's mother stopped speaking publicly altogether after hearing the report. Former officers resigned from advisory positions connected to the sheriff's department. Church attendance across Hollow Creek dropped almost overnight while state officials launched emergency investigations into historical abuse complaints tied to local youth programs. Yet amid the chaos, another horrifying clue emerged. During excavation beneath Noah's burial site, investigators uncovered a small rusted tin box hidden beneath roots nearby. Inside sat several childhood photographs damaged by moisture but still partially visible. Noah appeared in 2 images. Ethan Doyle appeared in another. And standing beside both boys in separate photographs was Pastor Eli Brennan, smiling directly at the camera. But the final photograph chilled investigators most of all, because it showed a group of unidentified boys standing outside Hollow Creek Community Church years before Noah disappeared. Several faces remained unknown, except one. A younger Samuel Grady stood among them too. The photograph changed the direction of the entire investigation overnight, because until that moment Samuel Grady existed in Hollow Creek's collective memory as a broken police officer who helped cover up Noah Callahan's death out of panic, fear, and loyalty to powerful men. But the image buried beneath Blackwater Ridge suggested something much darker. Samuel's connection to Pastor Eli Brennan and the church youth program stretched back years before Noah or Ethan Doyle ever disappeared. Detectives enlarged the photograph repeatedly beneath forensic lighting, searching every face visible. In the faded image, 12 boys stood outside Hollow Creek Community Church sometime around the summer of 1974, according to estimated film analysis. Some smiled naturally. Others looked uncomfortable. Pastor Brennan stood in the center with one hand resting on Samuel Grady's shoulder. But investigators quickly noticed another disturbing detail of the 12 boys in the photograph. For later disappeared under suspicious circumstances between 1975 and 1987. Ethan Doyle, Noah Callahan, Lucas Meyer, Benjamin Hart. Lucas and Benjamin were never officially classified as homicide victims because authorities at the time ruled one a drowning and the other a runaway. Now federal investigators reopened both cases immediately. Hollow Creek entered full-blown panic by the next morning. National broadcasts replayed the photograph continuously while former residents flooded tip lines with stories connected to the church youth program operated by Brennan and Coach Bell throughout the 70s and 80s. Men in their 40s and 50s described being invited to private mentorship retreats at cabins outside town. Others remembered boys disappearing briefly for weekends before returning withdrawn and frightened. Most never spoke publicly before because Pastor Brennan's reputation carried almost untouchable Authority inside Hollow Creek for decades. But once Noah's burial site revealed the hidden photograph, the silence collapsed completely. Federal agents established a dedicated hotline, receiving thousands of calls daily while psychologists and victim advocates arrived to assist potential survivors coming forward. Meanwhile, Sheriff Mercer and the task force focused on one terrifying possibility growing harder to ignore with every new revelation. Noah Callahan may not have died because he witnessed a single moment of abuse inside the school gym storage room. He may have uncovered evidence connected to a long-running operation hidden beneath Hollow Creek for years. Walter Grady reluctantly confirmed pieces of that theory during another late-night interrogation. According to him, Samuel occasionally hinted that Pastor Brennan collected boys who needed help. The phrasing disturbed investigators immediately. Walter explained that Brennan often targeted vulnerable children from unstable homes through church outreach programs, school athletics, and youth counseling. Most were never reported missing because they eventually returned home, but some did not. Detectives asked Walter directly whether Samuel believed Brennan physically harmed children. Walter closed his eyes before answering. My brother said people in town knew enough not to ask questions. Investigators reviewing archived town records soon uncovered another deeply disturbing pattern. Several boys connected to Brennan's youth programs during the 70s later developed severe addiction problems, psychological trauma, or unexplained disappearances from Hollow Creek altogether. Medical histories, juvenile arrests, suicide attempts, fragments of ruined lives scattered across decades. Yet no formal investigation into Brennan or Bell ever occurred while Mayor Richard Vane remained in office. Then came the financial records. Federal forensic accountants examining old church documents discovered large, unexplained cash. Withdrawals tied to Hollow Creek community outreach accounts throughout the late 70s and 80s. More troubling still, portions of the funds linked directly to properties owned quietly through shell companies connected to Mayor Vane's business associates. One property immediately stood out: Briarwood Lodge, abandoned since 1992. Located 20 miles outside Hollow Creek, deep within dense forest near the state line. Walter Grady reportedly went pale the moment investigators mentioned the name. According to him, Samuel once described Briarwood Lodge as the place where everything started. Authorities moved before dawn. State police sealed roads surrounding the abandoned property while helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting live footage nationwide. Briarwood Lodge sat rotting beneath pine trees, windows shattered. Roof partially collapsed after years of neglect. Locals avoided the area for decades because of rumors involving strange activity during the 80s. Now investigators armed with cadaver dogs and excavation equipment entered the property expecting the worst. What they found inside stunned even veteran detectives. The lodge basement contained multiple small rooms fitted with locks on the outside of the doors. Mattresses, rusted bed frames, children's drawings still taped to concrete walls beneath layers of mold. And scratched repeatedly across one wooden support beam, investigators found a single name carved deep into the surface: Noah. Forensic teams recovered biological evidence almost immediately. Hair samples, blood traces, fibers matching clothing recovered from Noah's burial site. Hollow Creek exploded with horror once images from Briarwood leaked publicly. Secret rooms found inside remote lodge. Investigators fear missing children held captive. Church youth program under criminal investigation. Protesters surrounded Hollow Creek Community Church while survivors publicly accused town leaders of protecting predators for decades. Former parish members removed memorial plaques honoring Pastor Brennan overnight. Yet despite mounting outrage, One terrifying question still haunted investigators more than any other. How many children passed through Briarwood Lodge over the years? Detectives began constructing timelines using church camp rosters, youth outreach lists, school records, and witness statements. The numbers alarmed them immediately. Dozens of boys spent time under Brennan and Bell's supervision between 1974 and 1987. Some later vanished temporarily. Others disappeared permanently. Many never spoke publicly again after leaving Hollow Creek. Then forensic analysts discovered something hidden beneath floorboards inside the lodge basement. A locked metal cash box wrapped carefully in deteriorating plastic. Inside, investigators found photographs, handwritten notes, and several audio cassette tapes damaged by moisture but partially recoverable. The photographs showed groups of boys at church outings, lakeside retreats, basketball camps. Most looked ordinary at first glance. Then analysts noticed recurring details. Certain boys appeared repeatedly, while others vanished from later photographs entirely. Ethan Doyle appeared in several. Noah appeared in one dated weeks before his disappearance. And standing beside nearly every group was Pastor Brennan, smiling calmly into the camera like a man, completely certain nobody would ever question him. But the handwritten notes disturbed investigators even more. Several contained coded references beside children's names. Compliant, difficult, needs guidance. One line beside Noah Callahan's name froze the task force completely. Saw too much at school. The implication destroyed any remaining doubt. Noah's disappearance was not random. The child became a threat after witnessing something tied directly to Brennan, Bell, and possibly others hidden within Hollow Creek's leadership structure. Then came another catastrophic discovery. Forensic enhancement of one damaged cassette tape revealed portions of a recorded conversation between two men investigators believed were Pastor Brennan and Mayor Vane. Static buried much of the audio, but one sentence emerged clearly enough to terrify everyone listening. If the boy talks, everything collapses. The tape carried a handwritten date, December 22nd, 1987, one day before Noah vanished. Investigators now believed Noah's fate may have been decided before he even left basketball practice. That snowy evening, Hollow Creek spiraled further into chaos after the tape leaked to national media. Former officials faced death threats. Survivors accused local police of decades-long corruption. State authorities announced a sweeping review of historical missing child cases connected to Hollow Creek and neighboring counties. Meanwhile, excavation teams returned to Blackwater Ridge after ground-penetrating radar identified additional underground disturbances near Noah and Ethan's graves. The search produced another horrifying result by sunset. A third burial site, smaller bones, different clothing remnants. Detectives suspected the remains belonged to Benjamin Hart, the so-called runaway from 1982. The town nearly collapsed emotionally. Parents who once believed Hollow Creek was safe now confronted the possibility that children had been disappearing beneath the community's nose for over a decade, while trusted leaders protected the perpetrators. Yet amid the avalanche of evidence, one mystery remained unresolved. Walter Grady still insisted Samuel never fully explained what Noah witnessed inside the school gym. Storage room. Investigators believe the answer might expose surviving participants still hiding pieces of the truth. Then a break finally came from an unexpected source. During restoration of the recovered cassette tapes from Briarwood Lodge, forensic audio specialists uncovered a second hidden recording buried beneath layers of static and damaged magnetic interference. The voice speaking was unmistakably a child, frightened, crying softly. Detectives listened in silence as the boy whispered fragmented sentences into the recorder. Coach said, "Don't tell. Pastor's downstairs. The mayor came too. Then the child said one final sentence that reportedly made a veteran FBI investigator remove his headphones and walk out of the room entirely. They said Noah won't leave this place anymore. The child's voice on the damaged cassette spread across Hollow Creek faster than any headline. Because hearing fear was different from reading reports or studying evidence bags beneath fluorescent lights. People could survive rumors. They could survive newspaper stories. But hearing a trembling child whisper, "Noah won't leave this place anymore," shattered something psychological inside the town forever. Parents who once defended Pastor Eli Brennan and Coach Thomas Bell stopped speaking publicly. Altogether, former church volunteers hired attorneys overnight. Retired officers refused interviews and disappeared behind locked doors while national media parked outside their homes waiting for reactions. Hollow Creek no longer looked like a grieving community searching for answers. It looked like a town realizing its entire identity may have been built on buried lies. Federal investigators immediately prioritized identifying the child heard on the recording. Forensic audio specialists estimated the speaker was between 10 and 13 years old. The accent matched local Hollow Creek patterns. But despite extensive comparison against archived interviews and school recordings, no immediate identification emerged. Investigators suspected the child may have been another victim connected to Briarwood Lodge whose disappearance never received national attention. That theory grew more terrifying by the hour as excavation teams continued searching the property grounds. By the third day, investigators uncovered burned clothing fragments, juvenile dental remains, and a shallow burial pit behind the lodge partially destroyed by erosion decades earlier. Preliminary analysis suggested at least 2 children may have been buried there temporarily before removal to another location. Then came the maps. Hidden inside a rusted filing cabinet beneath collapsed basement stairs, agents discovered folded county maps covered in colored markings and handwritten notes tied to remote areas surrounding Hollow Creek. Several markings corresponded with abandoned cabins, fishing camps, and church retreat sites connected historically to Pastor Brennan's outreach programs. Others circled isolated woodland areas never previously searched during missing child investigations. Sheriff Mercer reportedly stared at the maps for several minutes before whispering, "This town has no idea how bad this is about to become." Search warrants expanded immediately across 3 counties. State police established mobile command centers while cadaver dogs, forensic anthropologists, and federal crime scene teams flooded into the region. Hollow Creek transformed into a permanent live news broadcast. Helicopters hovered constantly overhead. National reporters delivered updates from frozen roadside locations while online investigators obsessed over every leaked document and recovered photograph. But inside the task force headquarters, investigators were becoming increasingly disturbed by one emerging pattern. Almost every child connected to the church outreach network shared similar backgrounds: unstable homes, alcoholic parents, foster placements, financial hardship, children unlikely to generate massive media attention if they vanished briefly or permanently. Noah Callahan suddenly appeared as the exception. Stable family, popular student, deep local roots. Detectives began believing Noah's disappearance caused panic not because it was the first crime connected to Brennan and Bell, but because Noah came from the kind of family Hollow Creek could not easily ignore. Walter Grady reluctantly confirmed that theory during another interview session. According to him, Samuel once admitted Mayor Vane feared Noah's case would bring journalists and state investigators crawling into places they should never see. Investigators pressed Walter repeatedly for specifics. What places? What exactly was hidden inside Hollow Creek? Walter insisted Samuel never fully explained, but he remembered one detail clearly. Samuel believed Briarwood Lodge was only one of several properties connected to Brennan's network. The others remained unidentified. Then another witness came forward unexpectedly. Her name was Diane Holloway, former nurse, 68 years old. Diane contacted investigators after seeing photographs recovered from Briarwood Lodge broadcast nationally. According to her statement, she recognized one child in the background of a group photograph as her younger brother Caleb Holloway, who disappeared briefly during the summer of 1981 before returning home traumatized and refusing to discuss where he had been. Caleb later died from overdose complications in 1997. Diane told investigators her brother became terrified whenever Pastor Brennan's name surfaced in conversation. He drank heavily, suffered nightmares. Once, during a breakdown years before his death, Caleb allegedly whispered something that Diane never forgot. There's another place underground. Detectives immediately focused on the statement. Another place underground. Investigators revisited architectural records connected to Hollow Creek Community Church, Briarwood Lodge, abandoned retreat centers, and properties owned through shell corporations tied to Mayor Vane. Buried inside county archives, they uncovered renovation permits filed quietly in 1976 for a structure known as St. Agnes Shelter. A former orphan outreach facility closed officially in 1989 after funding issues. The blueprints disturbed investigators immediately. Original basement layouts did not match later inspection records. Portions appeared intentionally removed from updated plans. More troubling still, St. Agnes sat less than 6 miles from the railway crossing where Noah disappeared. Authorities moved before dawn again. Search teams entered the abandoned shelter wearing respirators because mold and structural decay made portions of the building unstable. The facility looked untouched for decades. Dust-covered toys remained scattered across classrooms. Religious paintings peeled from water-damaged walls. Hallways smelled of rot and stagnant air. But once investigators reached the basement, they noticed something strange almost immediately. One concrete wall near the old furnace room produced hollow acoustic readings inconsistent with official building plans. Demolition crews broke through shortly after noon. Behind the wall sat a narrow, hidden corridor descending deeper underground. The discovery detonated nationwide within minutes. Secret underground passage found beneath abandoned shelter. Investigators fear more child victims. Armed agents sealed the entire property while cameras gathered outside barricades broadcasting. Nonstop speculation. Detectives descending the hidden staircase later described overwhelming silence beneath the structure. Concrete walls narrowed into a low underground chamber fitted with electrical wiring, rusted bunk frames, and heavy doors equipped with exterior locks nearly identical to those discovered at Briarwood Lodge. Investigators found children's clothing immediately, then drawings. Crude sketches covering sections of wall made with crayons and pencil fragments. Houses, trees, stick figures, some signed with first names. Noah appeared repeatedly. Ethan, Caleb, Benji, Lucas, and dozens of investigators did not recognize yet. One drawing nearly stopped the search entirely. It showed a church, several men standing outside, and a line of children descending underground beneath the building. Above the figures, a child had written 4 words in shaky lettering. They watched from above. Forensic teams expanded the search deeper into the chamber while investigators upstairs attempted, identifying names written across the walls. Then came another devastating discovery. Beneath loose flooring near the rear corner of the underground room, agents uncovered stacks of audio tapes preserved inside sealed plastic containers. More than 60 tapes total, carefully labeled by date, some stretching back to 1975. Federal authorities rushed the evidence under armed transport to forensic laboratories while the entire country waited for answers. Preliminary restoration of the first tapes revealed recordings of children speaking during what sounded like counseling sessions. Some cried. Others sounded medicated or frightened. Several mentioned Pastor Brennan directly. One tape contained a boy describing punishments inside the lower room if children attempted escape. Another referenced Coach Bell bringing new kids during snowstorms because roads stayed empty and nobody asked questions. Investigators listening to the recordings reportedly required psychological counseling afterward. But one tape changed everything again. Dated December 23rd, 1987, the night Noah disappeared. The recording captured an argument between adult men. Voices overlapped chaotically through static. Detectives identified Pastor Brennan almost immediately, then Mayor Vane, then possibly Thomas Bell. The men sounded panicked. One repeatedly insisted, "The kid recognized all of us." Another voice answered coldly, "Then we finish this tonight." But near the end of the tape came the most horrifying moment yet. A child screaming in the background. Then Noah's voice, weak, terrified, begging repeatedly to go home. The audio cut abruptly seconds later. Investigators inside the lab reportedly sat in silence after playback ended, because for the first time in 35 years, they were not imagining Noah Callahan's final hours. They were hearing them directly. Yet even that horror was overshadowed by the tape's final hidden detail. As forensic analysts enhanced damaged audio buried beneath the recording, another voice emerged faintly from the background. Calm, older, unidentified. A man investigators had never heard before, speaking one sentence slowly and clearly enough to send chills through the entire task force. If this reaches the state investigators, every one of us burns. The unidentified voice on the December 23rd tape terrified investigators more than the screaming, because until that moment, the Hollow Creek investigation revolved around names already buried in town history. Pastor Eli Brennan, Coach Thomas Bell, Mayor Richard Vane, Samuel Grady, dead men whose reputations collapsed piece by piece beneath decades of hidden crimes. But the calm voice speaking through static suggested something else entirely. Another participant. Someone controlled enough to think strategically while everyone else panicked around Noah Callahan's disappearance. Someone possibly powerful enough to remain hidden even now. Federal analysts spent days enhancing the recording frame by frame, searching for vocal identifiers. No match appeared in public databases. Yet one detail stood out immediately. The man spoke with authority. The others stopped talking whenever his voice entered the conversation. Detectives began referring to him privately as the fourth man. Hollow Creek became obsessed with identifying him. Online forums exploded with theories naming retired judges, businessmen, clergy members. Even former state officials connected indirectly to Hollow Creek during the 80s. The uncertainty poisoned the town further because residents no longer knew which memories to trust. Any respected face in an old photograph suddenly looked suspicious. Every surviving official from that era faced scrutiny. Meanwhile, investigators continued excavating properties linked to Pastor Brennan's network. The hidden underground chamber beneath St. Agnes shelter produced evidence at a scale nobody anticipated. Additional drawings, handwritten notes, medication bottles dated throughout the early 80s. Chains bolted discreetly beneath bed frames and scattered across the floor beneath layers of dust. Hundreds of tiny paper stars folded carefully from church donation flyers. At first, investigators assumed children made them during crafts or games. Then, forensic psychologists studying the chamber noticed patterns. Many stars contained names written inside, once unfolded. Names of boys, dates, some crossed out in red ink. Several corresponded directly to missing children already connected to the investigation. Others belonged to boys investigators had never heard of. Sheriff Mercer later admitted the realization made him physically ill. The stars may have functioned as a hidden tracking system documenting children brought through the underground rooms over more than a decade. By the end of the week, federal authorities officially confirmed remains recovered from Blackwater Ridge belonged to Noah Callahan, Ethan Doyle, and Benjamin Hart. DNA identification for a fourth child remained pending. Families gathered outside the forensic center holding candles while television crews broadcast emotional interviews nationwide. Noah's mother, Evelyn Callahan, appeared publicly for the first time since excavation began. Her voice shook violently during the brief statement. For 35 years, they made us search forests, rivers, strangers, anyone except themselves. They buried my son while standing beside us, pretending to help. The interview shattered viewers across the country. Hollow Creek became synonymous with institutional betrayal overnight. Then came another witness. Former county maintenance worker Gerald Pike contacted investigators after recognizing St. Agnes shelter during televised coverage. Gerald, now 79 and living in assisted care, claimed he performed repair work beneath the shelter during the winter of 1986. According to him, portions of the underground area were restricted completely during specific nights each month. He remembered hearing children crying below the building while armed off-duty officers stood guard. Upstairs, Gerald admitted he never reported anything because Mayor Vane personally warned workers never to discuss activities connected to the shelter. Detectives pressed him about specific names. Gerald identified Pastor Brennan immediately, then Thomas Bell. But when investigators asked whether he remembered anyone else present regularly, Gerald hesitated before answering quietly. There was a doctor, too. The room reportedly froze again. Gerald described a tall, older man wearing wire-rimmed glasses who visited the shelter frequently, carrying medical bags. Investigators immediately began searching archived medical records connected to Hollow Creek during the 80s. One name surfaced repeatedly beside church outreach programs and youth counseling initiatives. Dr. Leonard Fisher, pediatric psychiatrist, respected community figure, dead since 1998 following an apparent boating accident. The deeper detectives dug into Fisher's history, the worse the case became. Financial records tied Fisher directly to Briarwood Lodge and St. Agnes operational budgets, through shell foundations linked to Mayor Vane. More disturbingly, several children connected to the underground chamber recordings were documented patients of Fisher's psychiatric practice. Federal investigators now believe the network operating beneath Hollow Creek involved not only abuse and concealment, but systematic psychological control over vulnerable children. Then forensic analysis uncovered another devastating truth hidden within the audio tapes recovered. From St. Agnes, several children referenced sedation before transport between properties. One frightened voice whispered repeatedly about the sleeping shots. Investigators reviewing Dr. Fisher's archived medical logs discovered unexplained pharmaceutical purchases inconsistent with ordinary pediatric treatment. Sedatives, restraint medications, injectable compounds. Hollow Creek residents reacted with horror once the findings leaked publicly. Former patients of Fisher came forward describing blackouts, memory gaps, and terrifying nightmares connected to church retreats they attended as children. Some reported fragmented recollections of underground rooms years before investigators uncovered St. Agnes. Others remembered Noah Callahan speaking fearfully about secret meetings shortly before he vanished. Then the investigation took another catastrophic turn. During excavation beneath St. Agnes shelter, ground-penetrating radar identified a sealed cavity beneath the underground chamber floor itself. Demolition teams broke through concrete late on November 18th, while federal agents monitored from above. What investigators discovered inside nearly ended the search operation entirely. A second hidden room, smaller, completely windowless. The walls covered in thick soundproof insulation. Rusted restraints attached directly to metal flooring. And stacked carefully along one wall, dozens of children's shoes preserved in darkness for decades. Detectives entering the chamber later described overwhelming silence inside the room because everyone understood instantly what they were seeing. This was not temporary confinement. This room was built intentionally for long-term captivity. Forensic teams recovered biological evidence everywhere. Blood traces, hair, fingerprints, human tissue preserved beneath corroded restraints. Preliminary analysis suggested multiple victims occupied the chamber over many years. But the discovery that truly shattered investigators came from a hidden compartment beneath the floor. Inside sat a waterproof metal case containing videotapes labeled only by year. 1978, 1980, 1982, 1987. Federal authorities sealed the evidence immediately under extreme chain of custody restrictions. No footage leaked publicly, but rumors spread among investigators within hours. Children appeared in the recordings. So did recognizable adults from Hollow Creek. Psychological support staff were brought into the Evidence Review Center after several analysts reportedly suffered emotional breakdowns during preliminary screening. Meanwhile, Sheriff Mercer faced growing pressure from state officials demanding broader investigations into connected towns and institutions, because patterns emerging from the evidence suggested Hollow Creek may not have operated alone. Names appearing on outreach records linked Brennan's programs to neighboring counties across state lines. Several missing children cases from the late 70s suddenly shared overlapping details. Church camps, youth transportation vans, retreat programs. Investigators feared they were uncovering part of something regional rather than isolated. Then the tapes revealed Noah himself. During review of the 1987 videotape, investigators identified footage recorded inside the underground chamber days before Noah disappeared officially. According to leaked descriptions from federal sources, Noah appeared frightened but physically unharmed initially. The child repeatedly asked to go home while unseen adults questioned him aggressively about what he witnessed inside the school gym storage room. Detectives reportedly watched the footage in stunned silence because Noah clearly recognized several men speaking to him. He used first names, coach, pastor, mayor, which meant the child knew exactly who was threatening him. But one moment in the recording horrified investigators more than anything else recovered so far. At one point, Noah looked directly toward the camera and asked a question in a trembling voice, almost too soft to hear. Why is the sheriff here too? The implication detonated through the task force instantly. Because Hollow Creek Sheriff during 1987 was not Samuel Grady. It was Sheriff Arthur Pike, the man who led Noah's original missing child investigation for 6 straight months before retiring with honors in 1991. And Arthur Pike was still alive. The moment investigators heard Noah Callahan ask why the sheriff was there too, the entire command center reportedly fell into complete silence, because until that second, the Hollow Creek investigation revolved mostly around dead men, Pastor Eli Brennan, Coach Thomas Bell, Mayor Richard Vane, Dr. Leonard Fisher, ghosts buried beneath collapsing reputations and forgotten graves. But Arthur Pike was alive, 83 years old, living quietly less than 30 miles from Hollow Creek in a small lakeside community where neighbors still described him as polite, reserved, and deeply respected for serving the town during difficult years. Federal agents moved immediately. Before sunrise, armored vehicles surrounded Pike's property while helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting live images nationwide. Reporters crowded police barricades in freezing rain as agents escorted the former sheriff from his home wearing slippers and a heavy gray coat. Cameras captured Pike shielding his face while protesters screamed Noah Callahan's name from across the road. By noon, every major network in the country carried the same headline: Former Sheriff Detained in Hollow Creek Child Horror Investigation. Inside interrogation rooms at the federal field office, Arthur Pike remained calm. Too calm, according to investigators present. He requested coffee, asked for specific medications, corrected detectives when they misstated dates from the original Noah investigation. But when confronted with the videotape containing Noah's voice, Pike reportedly stopped speaking altogether for nearly 4 straight minutes. Then he leaned back slowly and whispered, "You should have left those tapes buried." The sentence immediately changed the tone of questioning. Detectives realized Pike was not shocked by the evidence because he already knew exactly what existed underground beneath St. Agnes Shelter. Federal prosecutors pressed aggressively. Did he participate directly? Did he know children were being held there? How many victims existed? Pike denied harming any child personally. But according to leaked interrogation notes, he admitted the town's leadership made impossible choices to preserve Hollow Creek from collapse. The phrasing disgusted investigators instantly, because to Pike, protecting the town mattered more than protecting children. Then came the first major breakthrough. Under questioning, Pike finally acknowledged being physically present inside the underground chamber, with Noah Callahan days before the disappearance became public. However, Pike insisted the boy was not initially intended to die. According to him, Noah accidentally witnessed sensitive activities involving Pastor Brennan and Coach Bell at the school gym. Detectives demanded clarification repeatedly. Pike refused specifics, but he admitted local officials feared public exposure would destroy institutions central to Hollow Creek's economy and political structure. Church programs, school funding, outreach networks, donations, influence. Pike claimed they intended only to keep the child isolated temporarily until they understood what he knew. Investigators listening behind mirrored glass reportedly reacted with visible anger because the language sounded clinical, bureaucratic, detached from the reality of a terrified 9-year-old trapped underground by trusted adults. Then Pike revealed something even worse. Noah was not the only child being held at St. Agnes during December 1987. The room froze again. Detectives demanded names immediately. Pike hesitated before giving one. Tyler Brooks, age 11. Foster child transferred briefly through Hollow Creek Youth Outreach that winter before disappearing from state records completely. Investigators scrambled through archived databases while Pike continued speaking in calm, measured sentences that sounded almost rehearsed after decades of silence. According to him, Tyler became close to Noah during captivity beneath St. Agnes. The boys tried escaping together repeatedly. Pike claimed Noah encouraged Tyler to tell investigators everything if they ever got free. Then Pike said something that reportedly made one federal prosecutor slam a hand against the table, hard enough to stop the interview. That's when Brennan decided the Callahan boy couldn't leave anymore. The implication horrified everyone listening. Noah's death may not have resulted from panic alone. Detectives now believed a deliberate decision was made to silence him permanently once the child proved unwilling to stay quiet. But Pike still refused identifying the fourth man. The calm, unidentified voice captured repeatedly throughout tapes recovered from St. Agnes and Briarwood Lodge. Investigators suspected Pike knew exactly who the man was. Each time detectives pressed the issue, Pike shut down completely. Then the former sheriff requested a private conversation with Sheriff Daniel Mercer alone. No cameras beyond standard recording equipment. No federal agents in the room. Mercer later refused revealing every detail publicly, but portions leaked afterward through investigative sources. According to those accounts, Pike warned Mercer the Hollow Creek network extended beyond the town itself and involved people still important enough to bury careers, investigations, maybe even bodies. Mercer reportedly asked directly whether powerful individuals outside Hollow Creek participated in the crimes. Pike answered quietly, "You think small towns build operations like St. Agnes alone?" The statement detonated through federal channels instantly. Investigators expanded inquiries into neighboring counties, church outreach systems, foster programs, and political donors connected to Brennan and Mayor Vane during the 70s and 80s. The case suddenly looked less like localized corruption and more like part of a broader hidden network operating through vulnerable children across multiple communities. Then came another catastrophic discovery. During forensic review of videotapes recovered from the underground chamber, analysts identified several unidentified adults appearing briefly in the background of footage spanning nearly a decade. Some faces remained too damaged for recognition. Others did not. One belonged to a former state senator who served on child welfare committees throughout the 80s before dying in 2006. Another appeared to be a regional church administrator still alive and living in another state. Federal authorities sealed portions of the evidence immediately under national investigative restrictions. Rumors exploded anyway. Hollow Creek became the center of one of the largest child exploitation investigations in modern state history. Protesters flooded government buildings, demanding accountability far beyond the town itself. Meanwhile, excavation teams searching properties connected to the outreach network uncovered more remains. By December 2022, authorities confirmed at least 7 children were likely buried across locations, tied to Brennan and his associates. Some disappeared officially. Others were never reported missing at all. DNA identification efforts stretched nationwide. Families from multiple states began contacting the task force, believing long-lost relatives might connect to the case. Then investigators found Tyler Brooks, or rather, what remained of him. Cadaver dogs searching woodland behind Briarwood Lodge alerted near a shallow ravine less than half a mile from the property. Excavation revealed juvenile remains wrapped in deteriorated blankets alongside fragments of state-issued foster care clothing. Dental records confirmed the identity within days. Tyler Brooks vanished from state oversight in January 1988, weeks after Noah disappeared publicly. No meaningful investigation ever followed because records falsely classified Tyler as a runaway, transferred between foster facilities. The revelation enraged the country. News commentators openly accused officials of ignoring vulnerable children while protecting influential institutions. Former foster system employees came forward with allegations of systematic negligence connected to Brennan's outreach operations. Hollow Creek itself became nearly unrecognizable beneath constant media pressure. Businesses closed. Schools received threats. Churches emptied. Residents stopped speaking to reporters entirely. Yet amid the chaos, one final mystery continued haunting investigators more than any other. What exactly did Noah Callahan witness inside the school gym storage room that triggered such extreme panic among powerful adults? The answer finally emerged from an unexpected source. During restoration of surveillance reels recovered from Hollow Creek Middle School archives, forensic video specialists uncovered damaged footage recorded accidentally after hours on December 23, 1987. The camera pointed toward a hallway outside the gym storage area. The video quality was terrible, grainy, distorted, but investigators clearly identified Noah stepping in a frame carrying his science project before, stopping suddenly outside the partially open storage room door. The child appeared confused at first, then frightened. Inside the room, several adults were visible briefly through the doorway. Coach Bell, Pastor Brennan, Dr. Fisher, and another man investigators immediately recognized from the videotapes recovered underground. Arthur Pike himself. The men appeared surrounding another child seated in a chair. The footage contained no audio. But Noah suddenly backed away from the doorway in visible panic before dropping his project onto the floor. One adult turned sharply toward him. Then the tape ended in static. Investigators reportedly replayed the footage dozens of times, searching for details about the unidentified child inside the room. Finally, forensic enhancement revealed enough of the boy's face to identify him. Caleb Holloway, the same boy whose sister claimed he returned traumatized from Brennan's programs years earlier, before dying from addiction decades later, which meant Noah did not simply witness abuse or secret meetings that night. He witnessed a surviving victim the adults believed would expose everything. And moments after seeing Caleb alive inside that room, Noah Callahan ran directly into the snow toward the worst people in Hollow Creek. The surveillance footage destroyed the final illusion that Noah Callahan's death resulted from panic spiraling out of control, because once investigators enhanced the hallway camera and identified Caleb Holloway, sitting inside the gym storage room surrounded by Pastor Brennan, Dr. Fisher, Coach Bell, and Sheriff Arthur Pike, the timeline became horrifyingly clear. Noah did not stumble accidentally into isolated misconduct. He witnessed an organized system already operating in secret for years. And the adults inside that room understood instantly that the child now represented a threat capable of collapsing everything they built beneath Hollow Creek. Federal prosecutors changed strategy almost overnight. What began as a cold case homicide investigation transformed into a sprawling criminal enterprise inquiry involving abuse, trafficking, corruption, kidnapping, obstruction, and potential interstate conspiracy. Task force walls filled with photographs, timelines, and maps stretching back nearly 15 years. Investigators no longer viewed Ethan Doyle, Benjamin Hart, Tyler Brooks, and Noah Callahan as isolated victims. They were pieces of something much larger hidden behind church programs, youth outreach systems, foster care transfers, and small-town authority figures operating almost without oversight. Arthur Pike remained central to the investigation. But despite long interrogation sessions, he still refused identifying the fourth man. The calm, unidentified voice heard repeatedly on recovered recordings. Detectives increasingly believed the man occupied a position powerful enough to frighten Pike even. After decades, whenever investigators approached the subject, the former sheriff became visibly tense for the first time during questioning. One federal agent later described it bluntly. Pike looked terrified as somebody still breathing. Meanwhile, forensic analysis of the underground videotapes continued producing devastating revelations. Several recordings documented children being questioned repeatedly about loyalty, secrecy, and earning trust. Others showed Pastor Brennan conducting what appeared outwardly to be counseling sessions while unseen adults monitored from behind cameras. Investigators reportedly struggled emotionally reviewing the material because many children appeared, desperate for approval from the very men exploiting them. Some tapes ended abruptly after children mentioned wanting to go home. Others cut to static following signs of distress or panic. But one recording changed the case forever. Dated December 21st, 1987, the tape showed Noah Callahan sitting alone inside the underground chamber beneath St. Agnes 2 days before his official disappearance became public. The boy looked exhausted, frightened, still wearing the same blue winter coat described by witnesses the night he vanished. At first, Noah refused answering questions from unseen adults. Then someone off camera mentioned his parents by name. Noah immediately became emotional. Detectives watching the footage later admitted the scene was almost unbearable. The child kept insisting he didn't tell anybody yet and begged repeatedly to go home before Christmas. But near the end of the tape, Noah finally revealed why the adults panicked so badly after he witnessed Caleb Holloway inside the school storage room. "I saw the pictures too," the boy whispered through tears. The room inside the federal evidence lab reportedly went silent. Detectives immediately froze the footage and reviewed Noah's statement repeatedly. Pictures. Investigators returned to the storage room theory with renewed urgency. Search teams reopened Hollow Creek Middle School despite planned demolition efforts already underway. After the scandal, beneath the old gym storage room, investigators discovered hidden compartments inside a maintenance crawl space sealed behind shelving units. Inside sat boxes of photographs, videotapes, financial ledgers, and handwritten records documenting children connected to Brennan's outreach programs over more than a decade. The evidence horrified even veteran investigators. Thousands of photographs. Some appeared innocent initially. Church outings, camps, basketball tournaments. Others clearly documented abuse, intimidation, and exploitation involving multiple adults already connected to the case. But investigators focused immediately on another terrifying implication. The hidden archive suggested the network maintained leverage over participants through blackmail. Powerful men appearing in compromising material alongside vulnerable children. Detectives suddenly understood why so many officials helped bury investigations for years. Exposure would destroy everyone involved. Then forensic accountants uncovered another layer beneath the conspiracy. Financial ledgers recovered from the school crawl space documented regular payments moving through. Shell charities tied to church outreach operations across 3 states. Several transactions linked directly to transport expenses, private retreat properties, and unidentified guest contributions. One recurring name appeared beside major payments throughout the 80s. Hawthorne Foundation. Investigators traced the organization to a private philanthropic network chaired historically by influential businessmen, political donors, and clergy figures throughout the region. Suddenly, Hollow Creek no longer looked isolated at all. It looked connected, deeply connected. National media exploded with speculation once details leaked. Investigators fear regional child exploitation network. Cold case widens beyond Hollow Creek. Political pressure intensified immediately. Governors demanded briefings. Federal oversight committees opened emergency hearings. Survivors from neighboring states contacted the task force, describing eerily similar experiences involving church retreats, youth shelters, and unexplained disappearances during the 70s and 80s. Yet amid the avalanche of evidence, one horrifying mystery still remained unresolved. Where was Caleb Holloway after Noah saw him inside the gym storage room? Because according to official records, Caleb returned home alive months earlier before eventually spiraling into addiction years later. But surveillance footage dated December 1987 clearly showed him still trapped inside the network. Long after his supposed release, investigators located Diane Holloway again and confronted her with the footage carefully. The interview reportedly devastated everyone present. Diane broke down immediately after seeing her brother on the screen. Through tears, she admitted Caleb returned home briefly during 1981, but disappeared repeatedly. Afterward, under mysterious circumstances. Each time, Pastor Brennan personally assured the family Caleb was attending special counseling. Retreats through church programs. Diane confessed something else too. Shortly before Noah vanished, Caleb appeared at her apartment terrified and heavily bruised. He tried telling her something about children being moved underground between properties. But before he explained fully, Sheriff Arthur Pike arrived personally and escorted Caleb away, claiming the young man required psychiatric treatment through Dr. Fisher's care program. Diane never saw her brother freely again. Detectives immediately realized Caleb may have survived inside the network for years while authorities manipulated records to keep him hidden. Then came a notebook. During deeper excavation beneath St. Agnes shelter, investigators discovered a small spiral notebook concealed inside an air vent behind the underground chamber. Water damage ruined portions of the pages, but enough survived to send shockwaves through the task force. The notebook appeared written by Caleb Holloway himself. Dates stretched from 1982 through early 1988. The entries described underground rooms, locked cabins, children transported during storms, punishments for speaking publicly, and repeated references to the man upstairs, whom everyone feared more than Brennan or Pike. Caleb never identified the man directly by name, but several entries described him arriving in expensive cars accompanied by security personnel. One sentence buried near the end of the notebook chilled investigators completely. Pastor says if the upstairs man falls, all the judges and police fall too. Federal prosecutors immediately sealed portions of the notebook under protective orders because the implications reached far beyond Hollow Creek. The network may have possessed influence deep inside law enforcement and judicial systems for years. But Caleb's final entry proved even more devastating. Dated December 24th, 1987, the day after Noah disappeared officially, the note read only 2 sentences written shakily across the page. Noah tried helping me escape. They hurt him bad. Then beneath it, one final line. The sheriff cried after. Investigators confronted Arthur Pike again that same night. This time the former sheriff looked exhausted, older, less composed than before. Detectives read Caleb's final notebook entry aloud, while Pike stared silently at the interrogation table. Then Sheriff Mercer asked the question haunting the entire country. Did Noah Callahan die trying to save another child? Pike reportedly closed his eyes for several seconds before answering quietly enough investigators. Almost missed it. That boy was the only decent person in that whole room. Then, for the first time since his arrest, Arthur Pike began to cry. Arthur Pike, crying inside the interrogation room, became one of the most replayed images in modern true crime history after leaked security footage surfaced online days later because the site felt almost impossible to process. For weeks, the country viewed Pike as a symbol of corruption, cowardice, institutional evil hidden behind small-town authority. But now the former sheriff sat hunched beneath fluorescent lights, sobbing uncontrollably while federal investigators questioned him about a 9-year-old boy murdered 35 years earlier, trying to save another child trapped inside a hidden network beneath Hollow Creek. The footage divided public opinion instantly. Some saw remorse. Others saw fear from a man realizing decades of lies were collapsing around him. Investigators themselves remained uncertain, because despite Pike's emotional breakdown, he still refused identifying the fourth man, the mysterious figure appearing repeatedly behind the scenes throughout the case. Yet after Caleb Holloway's notebook surfaced, something inside Pike clearly shifted. He stopped requesting attorneys during several interviews. He corrected timelines voluntarily. He identified additional transport routes used between Briarwood Lodge, St. Agnes Shelter, and abandoned church retreat sites across neighboring counties. And most importantly, he finally described what happened during Noah Callahan's final night alive. According to Pike, after Noah witnessed Caleb inside the school gym storage room on December 23, 1987, Pastor Brennan panicked immediately. Coach Bell wanted to convince the boy to stay quiet through threats and manipulation. Dr. Fisher argued Noah should be sedated temporarily until they understood how much he told others already. But the fourth man ordered something different. Pike claimed the unidentified figure insisted Noah needed to disappear completely before state. Investigators or Noah's parents triggered wider scrutiny. Detectives demanded the man's identity repeatedly. Pike refused again, but this time he offered another clue. He wasn't from Hollow Creek, Pike whispered. But everybody in town answered him. Investigators pressed further. Politician? Businessman? Clergy? Pike only shook his head slowly. Then he revealed another devastating detail. Noah and Caleb attempted to escape together from St. Agnes shelter hours before Noah died. According to Pike, the boys slipped through a maintenance corridor during a snowstorm, while most adults argued upstairs about how to contain the situation. Caleb managed reaching nearby woods temporarily. Noah did not. Coach Bell caught him near the railway crossing after the child fell on ice, trying to flee. What happened afterwards still remained partially disputed. Pike insisted Noah's fatal head injury came accidentally during the struggle near the frozen concrete embankment. But Caleb's notebook and forensic findings painted a far darker picture. Because once Noah regained consciousness afterward, the adults involved made a deliberate choice not to save him. Pike admitted that too eventually. The boy kept saying he'd tell everybody, he whispered during one recorded interview. Brennan said if Noah talked, the state police would tear this whole place apart. Investigators listening through observation glass reportedly reacted with visible disgust. Even now, Pike described the decision like institutional damage control rather than murder. But then he said something unexpected. According to Pike, Noah never stopped trying to protect Caleb even after the injury. The child reportedly begged the adults not to hurt the older boy, begged them repeatedly while restrained inside the patrol car during transport toward Blackwater Ridge. Pike claimed Noah believed if he cooperated quietly, Caleb might survive. Sheriff Mercer later admitted that detail haunted him more than anything else uncovered during the investigation. A terrified 9-year-old child trying to negotiate mercy for someone else while adults debated whether he should live. Meanwhile, federal investigators expanded operations far beyond Hollow Creek itself. Search warrants executed across multiple counties uncovered additional records tied to the Hawthorne Foundation and affiliated outreach programs. Several properties linked indirectly to the foundation produced disturbing evidence. Hidden rooms, medical restraints, photographs matching children already identified through the Hollow Creek investigation. By early 2023, federal authorities quietly acknowledged internally that the network may have operated regionally for over 15 years using churches, shelters, camps, and foster systems to target vulnerable boys. Yet despite overwhelming evidence against numerous dead participants, one central fear dominated the task force. The fourth man might still be alive. That fear intensified after a break-in at the temporary federal archive facility storing portions of the recovered videotape evidence. On January 14, 2023, security alarms triggered shortly after 2 a.m. Armed agents responded within minutes and discovered someone had forced entry through a rear maintenance corridor. Several evidence boxes were opened. One surveillance camera disabled professionally. Yet strangely, almost nothing appeared stolen except a single videotape labeled 1984 Retreat Session B. Investigators immediately treated the incident as a targeted operation rather than random theft. Whoever entered the archive knew exactly what they wanted. And according to internal inventory logs, the missing tape reportedly contained footage involving unidentified adult participants never publicly revealed during the investigation. Panic spread rapidly through federal channels. If surviving members of the network still possessed resources capable of infiltrating secured evidence facilities, the Hollow Creek conspiracy might reach far deeper into modern institutions than anyone realized. Then another witness came forward. His name was Daniel Reese, former state trooper, 76 years old, living in isolation since retiring in 1998. Daniel contacted investigators after Arthur Pike's arrest became national news. According to Reese, he encountered Mayor Richard Vane and Pastor Brennan during a traffic stop outside Hollow Creek in February 1985, transporting two unidentified boys inside a church van during severe weather conditions. Reese initially attempted filing irregular transport reports afterward because the children appeared frightened and heavily sedated. But within days, his supervisors ordered the complaint buried. Reese claimed a state official from outside the county personally warned him never to pursue the matter further if he valued his career. Investigators demanded the official's name immediately. Daniel hesitated before answering quietly. Judge Malcolm Avery. The name sent shockwaves through the task force. Malcolm Avery was not just another official. He served for decades as one of the most influential judges in the state juvenile court system. During the exact years vulnerable children disappeared through outreach and foster programs. Connected to Hollow Creek. More disturbingly, Avery remained alive. Retired, but active in several philanthropic organizations tied historically to the Hawthorne Foundation. Detectives rushed to compare Avery's public speeches against audio recovered from St. Agnes tapes. Preliminary voice analysis produced chilling results. Strong similarities. Not definitive enough for prosecution, but enough to terrify investigators already suspecting the fourth man occupied high level. Institutional authority. Federal agents began discreet surveillance operations around Avery immediately. Yet before authorities could move publicly, another catastrophe struck the investigation. On January 22nd, Arthur Pike was found unconscious inside his federal detention cell after suffering what officials initially described as cardiac complications. But forensic toxicology later identified traces of uncommon sedative compounds in his bloodstream, matching medications linked previously to Dr. Fisher's underground operations. Pike survived barely long enough for emergency surgery before slipping into critical condition. Investigators erupted internally. Someone had reached him inside federal custody. Media outlets exploded with speculation about witness silencing and institutional infiltration. Protesters gathered outside federal buildings demanding answers, while surviving Hollow Creek victims panicked openly, fearing powerful figures were still orchestrating concealment efforts decades later. Sheriff Mercer visited Pike during intensive care after surgery. According to leaked accounts from medical staff, Pike regained consciousness briefly sometime after midnight despite heavy sedation. Mercer reportedly leaned close, asking one final time for the identity of the fourth man. Pike struggled to breathe before whispering a fragmented sentence investigators would later obsess over endlessly. The judge kept the lists. Then monitors began screaming as Pike crashed again. He died 43 minutes later. Federal authorities immediately secured Judge Malcolm Avery's estate under emergency warrant. Authority. But when investigators entered the property the next morning, they discovered something chilling. Avery was gone. His car remained parked in the garage. Wallet, phone, medications, all untouched. Yet the 78-year-old former judge had vanished completely sometime during the night. Then investigators searching Avery's private office uncovered a locked floor safe hidden beneath shelving units. Inside sat stacks of documents, financial ledgers connected to Hawthorne Foundation accounts, photographs from church retreat sites across multiple states, and one final item that reportedly left seasoned federal agents speechless. A handwritten list containing dozens of children's names categorized beside dates and locations. At the very top of the page, underlined twice in dark black ink, sat one entry investigators recognized instantly. Noah Callahan, problem witness. The phrase problem witness changed the emotional gravity of the Hollow Creek investigation forever, because for months the country viewed Noah Callahan as a tragic child trapped accidentally inside a nightmare built by powerful adults. But Judge Malcolm Avery's handwritten notation revealed something colder, more deliberate, more terrifying. Noah was not collateral damage. He was identified categorized, discussed like a threat requiring containment. Federal agents staring at the recovered list reportedly understood instantly they were no longer investigating isolated crimes buried beneath one corrupted town. They were staring at evidence of an organized system tracking children across years and possibly across state lines. The safe inside Avery's office contained over 400 pages of records tied to the Hawthorne Foundation, juvenile transport programs, church outreach initiatives, foster care transfers, and sealed court interventions stretching from 1974 through the early 1990s. Names repeated constantly beside coded markings investigators still struggled decoding fully. Compliant, transfer approved, special placement, restricted contact, and scattered among the paperwork, dozens of references to St. Agnes Shelter, Briarwood Lodge, and other properties already connected to the Hollow Creek network. But one detail disturbed investigators most. Several names on the list belonged to children officially classified by authorities as runaways. Decades earlier, others matched unidentified remains discovered recently across remote burial sites linked to the investigation. The implication was horrifying. The network maintained records not only of children under its control, but potentially of victims who never escaped alive. Meanwhile, Malcolm Avery remained missing. Federal marshals expanded searches nationwide, while news helicopters hovered constantly outside his abandoned estate. Public outrage exploded once the existence of the problem witness list leaked to media outlets. Parents across multiple states demanded reviews of historical missing child investigations connected to foster systems and religious outreach organizations. Protesters gathered outside courthouses carrying enlarged photographs of Noah, Ethan, Tyler, Caleb, and dozens of other boys whose names surfaced through the investigation. Hollow Creek itself became almost ghost-like beneath the pressure. Businesses shuttered permanently. Churches sat empty. Former residents removed family photographs from social media after online investigators began identifying people connected indirectly to the network decades earlier. Yet amid the chaos, detectives focused obsessively on one question. Where was Avery going? Investigators reviewing financial records discovered several dormant accounts tied to Shell, corporations historically connected to Hawthorne Foundation properties. One account showed recent activity only hours before Avery disappeared. A withdrawal. Cash. $30,000 removed from a rural bank branch nearly 200 miles from Hollow Creek. Surveillance footage captured a grainy image of an older man resembling Avery entering a dark sedan, registered under a fake identity. Then the trail vanished again. Sheriff Mercer privately feared the judge was heading toward another hidden property unknown to investigators. That fear intensified after forensic teams searching Avery's documents uncovered maps marked with symbols identical to those found inside St. Agnes Shelter years earlier. One location, circled repeatedly, stood out immediately. Ashcroft Retreat, abandoned Catholic campgrounds near the mountains 3 states away. The property closed officially in 1994 after severe storm damage. But archival photographs connected the retreat directly to Hawthorne Foundation-sponsored youth programs throughout the 80s. Authorities moved before dawn once again. State police, federal tactical units, and forensic teams converged on Ashcroft Retreat under freezing rain while helicopters broadcast live overhead. The property sat isolated deep within dense forest. Several cabins partially collapsed after decades of neglect. Investigators entering the grounds immediately noticed signs of recent activity. Fresh tire tracks, food wrappers, a recently extinguished fire pit near the main chapel building. Someone had been there recently, maybe still was. Agents swept cabin by cabin with weapons drawn, while forensic teams secured the perimeter. Then one investigator discovered a concealed basement entrance beneath the retreat chapel. Floorboards. The atmosphere reportedly shifted instantly. Every investigator connected to Hollow Creek recognized the pattern now. Hidden underground structures, locked rooms, concealed corridors beneath institutions designed publicly to protect children. Tactical teams descended carefully into darkness beneath the chapel. What they found horrified even veteran federal agents. Another underground chamber, larger than St. Agnes, more sophisticated, rows of surveillance monitors covered in dust. Metal doors, examination tables, storage lockers containing children's clothing preserved in plastic bins. And on one concrete wall near the rear corridor, investigators found dozens of names scratched repeatedly into the surface over many years. Some already known: Noah, Ethan, Tyler, Caleb. Others entirely new. The task force reportedly fell into stunned silence because Ashcroft proved the network extended far, beyond Hollow Creek, beyond any remaining doubt. Then came another devastating discovery. Inside a locked records room beneath the retreat, investigators uncovered reel-to-reel tapes, photographs, court files, and transport manifests documenting movement of children between facilities connected to Hawthorne Foundation operations throughout at least 6 states. Federal prosecutors later described the evidence as one of the largest concealed institutional abuse archives ever uncovered in the region. Yet despite the scale of the discovery, investigators focused urgently on one possibility. If Avery fled toward Ashcroft, he might still be inside. Search teams expanded deeper into the underground structure. Eventually, agents reached a sealed security door requiring manual breach equipment. When the door finally opened, investigators stepped into a smaller private office hidden beneath the main chamber. A desk lamp still glowed dimly from portable battery power. Fresh coffee sat half-finished beside stacks of open files. Avery had been there recently, maybe minutes earlier. Then agents noticed the tape recorder, still running. A cassette turned slowly inside while static filled the room. Investigators stopped breathing. Sheriff Mercer himself pressed play from the beginning. Malcolm Avery's voice emerged almost immediately. Calm, tired, resigned. If you're hearing this, then Hollow Creek finally surfaced. Detectives reportedly listened in total silence as Avery described the origins of the network, stretching back to the early 70s. According to the recording, influential officials, clergy members, law enforcement figures, and wealthy donors built informal systems through outreach programs and juvenile institutions to exploit vulnerable children while protecting one another through blackmail and shared secrecy. Avery admitted the network expanded regionally over time because nobody stopped it early enough. Small crimes evolved into organized concealment. Disappearances became manageable through corrupt courts and falsified foster records. And anyone threatening exposure faced intimidation or elimination. But when Avery mentioned Noah Callahan, his voice changed noticeably for the first time. The Callahan boy ruined everything, he whispered. According to the tape, Noah witnessed Caleb Holloway being restrained inside Hollow Creek Middle School after attempting escape from St. Agnes. Noah recognized several adults immediately and threatened to tell his parents and police. Avery claimed Pastor Brennan panicked. Bell wanted the child silenced quietly. Pike hesitated, but Avery himself gave the final order: contain the situation permanently. Investigators listening reportedly stared at each other in horror because after months of speculation, they were finally hearing direct admission from the fourth man himself. Malcolm Avery continued speaking calmly about Noah's final hours. The child resisted constantly, tried protecting Caleb even after being injured near the railway crossing, begged adults not to hurt anyone else. Then Avery described the moment at Blackwater Ridge when Noah regained consciousness during burial. Preparations. The boy looked directly at me, Avery said softly through static. He asked if his mother knew where he was. Several investigators later admitted they struggled emotionally hearing the recording afterward. Avery's voice remained detached, almost reflective, while describing the death of a terrified child. But near the end of the tape came one final revelation no one expected. Avery claimed Noah's death did not fully silence the network because Caleb Holloway escaped shortly afterward. According to Avery, Caleb disappeared with evidence hidden somewhere investigators still had not found. Photographs, names, lists capable of exposing surviving participants never publicly connected to the case. Then the tape ended with a sentence that reportedly sent immediate panic through federal command. If Caleb's archive surfaces, people still holding office will fall with the dead. Investigators searched the underground office frantically afterward. But Malcolm Avery himself was gone. No body, no signs of struggle. Only one final clue remained behind. On the desk beside the tape recorder sat a faded photograph investigators had never seen before. The image showed Noah Callahan and Caleb Holloway standing together outside St. Agnes Shelter. During winter 1987, Noah looked frightened. Caleb looked exhausted. And written carefully across the back of the photograph in fresh ink were 6 chilling words. He buried the truth underwater. The sentence on the back of the photograph launched the largest search operation in Hollow Creek's history before sunrise because investigators understood immediately that Malcolm Avery had not left those words behind accidentally. He buried the truth underwater. Sheriff Mercer ordered emergency review of every location connected to the network involving lakes. Reservoirs, flooded quarries, church retreat camps, abandoned docks, and drainage tunnels stretching across multiple counties. Helicopters swept frozen shorelines while sonar teams deployed across Blackwater Lake, Hollow Creek Reservoir, and the flooded limestone quarry outside Briarwood Lodge. National media covered the operation live around the clock. Protesters carried photographs of missing children beside police barricades while survivors gathered silently in candlelight vigils across the state. The Hollow Creek investigation had already shattered careers, churches, law enforcement agencies, and political institutions. But investigators now feared the final truth remained hidden somewhere beneath dark water waiting decades to surface. Then came the breakthrough. On February 11th, 2023, sonar operators scanning the flooded quarry near Briarwood Lodge detected a large metallic object resting nearly 60 feet below the surface beneath layers of sediment and collapsed debris. Divers descended through freezing black water later that afternoon while helicopters hovered overhead, broadcasting every movement nationwide. Visibility underwater measured less than 2 feet. Jagged quarry walls and rusted machinery made the operation extremely dangerous. But within minutes, divers confirmed the object was not construction equipment or debris. It was a bus, old, deliberately submerged. Windows shattered outward. Chains wrapped around the frame. The discovery sent shockwaves through the command center instantly. Investigators rushed historical vehicle records tied to church programs and outreach organizations connected to Hollow Creek. One match surfaced almost immediately. A youth transport bus registered to the Hawthorne Foundation vanished from inventory records in 1988. Without explanation. Detectives reportedly stared at the screen in silence because the date aligned exactly with Noah Callahan's disappearance and Caleb Holloway's final known movements. Recovery teams worked through the night, lifting the bus slowly from the quarry floor while crowds gathered behind barricades under freezing rain. Cameras captured the vehicle emerging from dark water like something dragged directly from a nightmare buried beneath the town for decades. Mud and algae covered most of the frame, but faded lettering remained partially visible beneath corrosion. Hawthorne Youth Outreach. Then investigators opened the rear emergency door. Several agents reportedly turned away immediately afterward. Inside the submerged bus, forensic teams discovered restraints attached beneath seats, deteriorated children's belongings scattered across the floor, and sealed waterproof containers hidden within interior compartments. But near the rear of the vehicle came the worst discovery of all: human remains, multiple sets. Juvenile. Federal authorities sealed the quarry instantly while recovery operations intensified. Hollow Creek stopped breathing again. Families across several states flooded DNA hotlines, fearing long-missing children may have finally been found beneath the water. Yet amid the horror, investigators focused urgently on the waterproof containers recovered from inside the bus. Because according to Avery's recording, Caleb Holloway escaped with evidence powerful enough to expose surviving participants still protected decades later. Forensic teams opened the containers under armed supervision the following morning. Inside sat hundreds of photographs, audio tapes, handwritten journals, transport manifests, court documents, and lists of names far larger than anything recovered previously. Caleb Holloway had not merely escaped. He stole the network's archive before disappearing. And somehow he hid it underwater where nobody found it for 35 years. The journals appeared written by Caleb himself between 1987 and 1988 while moving between safe locations after fleeing Hollow Creek. The entries described Noah's final days in devastating detail. According to Caleb, Noah never stopped trying to help the other boys trapped beneath St. Agnes, even after realizing escape might cost him his life. The child reportedly whispered constantly about telling real police and getting everyone home safely once they escaped. Caleb described Noah sharing food with younger boys, comforting children during punishments, even trying repeatedly to distract adults so others could rest. Detectives reviewing the journals later admitted one realization became impossible to ignore. Noah Callahan died acting far braver than any adult surrounding him. But Caleb's writings also exposed something even darker. The network extended into juvenile courts, foster placement systems, private donor foundations, and religious outreach organizations across multiple states, exactly as investigators feared. Judges, clergy, officers, wealthy businessmen, social workers, some dead, others still alive. Several names connected directly to active public office even now. Federal prosecutors immediately sealed portions of the archive under emergency national investigative orders, while coordinated raids launched simultaneously across 4 states. The fallout became historic. Retired officials disappeared from public view overnight. Church organizations collapsed. Several former juvenile court administrators faced federal charges within weeks. News networks described the Hollow Creek investigation as one of the most extensive institutional child exploitation conspiracies uncovered in modern regional history. Yet even amid nationwide outrage, one mystery still remained unresolved. What happened to Caleb Holloway himself? His journals ended abruptly in March 1988. No confirmed sightings existed afterward. But buried within the final pages, investigators discovered one last entry describing the night Noah died at Blackwater Ridge. Caleb claimed he escaped into the woods during the chaos while hidden nearby, watching events unfold through snowfall. According to the journal, Noah regained consciousness briefly during burial preparations and tried warning Caleb to keep running. Then Caleb wrote something investigators would later read publicly during memorial services for the victims. Noah knew he wasn't getting out, but he still smiled at me like I could. The sentence devastated the country once released. Hollow Creek transformed permanently from a cold case mystery into a symbol of institutional betrayal, and forgotten victims failed by nearly every system designed to protect them. Memorials appeared nationwide. Noah Callahan's recovered remains were finally laid to rest beside Ethan Doyle, Tyler Brooks, Benjamin Hart, and other identified victims during a funeral attended by thousands. Church bells rang across multiple states while survivors carried photographs of missing children through silent processions beneath winter skies. Sheriff Mercer later admitted the funerals felt less like closure and more like an indictment against decades of silence. Then, 3 months after the quarry recovery, investigators received one final shock. A package arrived anonymously at the Federal Task Force office without return address. Inside sat a cassette tape and a single handwritten note. For Noah. Forensic analysts confirmed the tape was recorded recently. The voice speaking belonged to an older man, weak, exhausted, but unmistakable to investigators familiar with Caleb Holloway's journals and surviving childhood recordings. Caleb was alive. The room reportedly fell silent as the tape played. Caleb described fleeing Hollow Creek after Noah's death, carrying stolen evidence from St. Agnes and Briarwood Lodge. According to him, Noah deliberately created distractions during transport between locations so Caleb could escape with the archives. Caleb spent decades hiding because surviving members of the network continued searching for him long after the original crimes. But after Malcolm Avery disappeared and the quarry evidence surfaced publicly, Caleb finally believed enough truth had emerged to speak one last time. Near the end of the tape, Caleb's voice broke completely while describing Noah Callahan. He was just a kid, Caleb whispered, but every grown man in that town was terrified of him because he wouldn't stop telling the truth. Investigators later searched extensively for Caleb using clues buried within the recording. They never found him. Some believed he died shortly afterward from illness. Others suspected he disappeared intentionally again, fearing surviving members of the network remained free. Officially, Caleb Holloway remains missing to this day. Malcolm Avery vanished permanently as well. Despite nationwide manhunts, no confirmed trace of the former judge ever surfaced again. Some investigators believed he drowned himself. Others suspected powerful surviving associates helped him disappear before federal raids began. Sheriff Mercer offered a different theory years later during a documentary interview. Men like Avery survive by hiding behind silence, he said quietly. But Noah destroyed the silence. Today, Blackwater Ridge stands empty except for a memorial overlooking the frozen excavation site. With a red winter glove first emerged from the ground after 35 years. Visitors still leave candles, handwritten notes, and children's toys beside Noah Callahan's stone marker every winter. And according to locals, when heavy snow falls across Hollow Creek late at night, older residents still remember the story that terrified their town for decades. The little boy who saw too much, tried saving everyone else anyway, and forced buried secrets into the light long after the men responsible believed the truth was gone forever beneath the cold, dark earth.